As we discussed in Module 2, the annual probability of inundation is the total annual probability that a leveed area will be inundated due to levee breach prior to overtopping, component malfunction or improper operation, or overtopping without breach, and is used when evaluating National Flood Insurance Program or NFIP accreditation. Because it already includes overtopping without breach, breach by overtopping must be excluded from the calculations to avoid double counting. So the annual probability of inundation of the leveed area becomes the annual probability of failure for all prior to overtopping potential failure modes, plus the annual exceedance probability of overtopping. We first need the cumulative distribution function for the annual probability of inundation. To calculate the annual probability of inundation, or API, we're going to set the system response probability to 1 for all stages that result in overtopping, and generate a CDF which accounts for uncertainty in the flood hazard and the prior to overtopping system response. Again, we want the prior to overtopping annual probability of failure plus the annual exceedance probability of overtopping, and setting the system response probability to 1 for all stages that result in overtopping is a simple way to achieve those results. The assurance we are going to report corresponds to the percentile at the 1% annual probability of inundation of the leveed area and informs the accreditation recommendation for NFIP. The assurance is our level of confidence or belief that the annual chance of flooding is less than 1%. In other words, we are reporting how confident we are that the leveed area is not in the 100-year floodplain. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers assurance criteria is summarized on this slide. If the assurance for 1% API is 85% or greater, the Corps will recommend accreditation. If the assurance for 1% API is between 65% and 85%, the recommendation will likely be to accredit unless there is compelling evidence against. If the assurance for 1% API is less than 65%, the recommendation will be to not accredit. In order for FEMA to accredit a levee system, FEMA must also consider O&M plans, emergency preparedness plans, and interior drainage. In a Corps of Engineer risk assessment, information should be readily available to be able to fully address O&M and emergency preparedness requirements for risk assessment purposes. However, information needed to fully address interior drainage for accreditation purposes will likely not be included as part of the risk assessment. It is important to explain gaps for any of these three areas related to accreditation purposes. The Corps and FEMA are working to better align and understand our processes. There are some subsets of requirements of 44 CFR 65.10 that could be simple for Corps of Engineers to collect as part of our activities, and there are some that we will not address.